Hello, good evening. I am working on getting the town hall up right now. Give me 1 sec. Same thing you used to connect. Okay. Give me just a second, guys. See if it was changed or something. One second. It's coming. I promise. If anything, we're going to get the preview. And maybe we can just like bring it up again and get another preview. Let's go with it.
Than a sexist who's a
hang on. I got something echoing here. All right, here we go.
Chris,
I'll try and find another one so this expiration doesn't go through.
And I certainly hope
Let's listen in. We'll talk in a minute.
Not only has a good chance to defeat Trump, I think we have a chance to defeat him very badly, because I think, because I think there is a growing revulsion in this country to this guy's behavior. People want to turn on the television and not be embarrassed when their kids are in the room about who is president. We want a president who believes in democracy, believes in our Constitution, not one who is trying to undermine American democracy here and around the world. So I'm feeling good. and I think we got a good shot to win this thing.
All right, so now's your chance to make the case to the voters of this state. Let's bring in A.J. Harley. He's from Goose Creek. He was friends with Tawanza Sanders. She's the youngest victim in the 2015 church shooting in Charleston, South Carolina. She was 26 years old, a recent graduate with a business, AJ's recent graduate with a business administration degree. AJ helped create something called the Tawanza Sanders Scholarship. It helps local minorities with higher education. He's currently undecided about who he's going to support in the primary, but he has a question for you tonight. AJ, thank you.
Thanks for having me. So my question for you this morning is, this evening. Let me start again. About 5 years ago, we lost 9 people in the Charleston Emanuel 9 massacre. They were attending Bible study in our beautiful city. The youngest, Tawanza Sanders, was a phenomenal friend and an inspiration for me today. Since then, nationwide, there has been massacre after massacre. I want to know what your plan about gun laws, background checks, and how these issues are being addressed or resolved. How can we minimize the chances of something like this happening again?
Good. Thank you, AJ. Thank you for the work you're doing. AJ is raising an issue that I hear from coast to coast. No matter what your politics may be, people are horrified and disgusted every time we turn on the TV and we hear another mass shooting. I was in El Paso just the other day, and you had 22 people massacred there, where the very sick person was actually targeting Latinos. You talk about Charleston and the murder of African Americans. Last year, it was in a synagogue in Pittsburgh where Jewish people were targeted. So to answer your question, first point.
I'm still looking, by the way.
My administration will do what the American people want, not what the NRA wants. All right? What is very clear to me is there is a growing consensus in this country. I'm not going to tell you everybody agrees on every nuance, but there is a growing consensus between gun owners, non-gun owners, rural states like mine, and urban states about several things. Number one, we need universal background checks.
Yeah, that's fair.
People who have a violent past, including domestic violence, should not be owning guns. Number two, we have got to end the so-called gun show loophole, which allows people to legally purchase guns while avoiding a background check. Number three, we've got to end the so-called straw man provision,
it's pretty
which allows
heavy
you
today,
to legally walk in, buy as many guns as you want, and then sell them to gangs and criminal elements. Number four, what we have got to do, and something that I have supported for like 30 years, is ban the sale and distribution of assault weapons in this country. I am proud that I have a D- voting record from the NRA, and I suspect as president, it'll get even worse.
Quick follow. As you probably know, former Vice President Biden has come after you on this issue. He has called your position immoral when it comes to providing legal protection for gun manufacturers. He's also criticized for your previous no votes on the Brady bill.
Well, first of all, that Brady bill was, I believe, in 1993. And in terms of the manufacturer's liability, I am now on the bill that takes away that exemption. Bottom line is, I think what we all know is, AJ was saying, what we have seen too many times, these horrible, horrible shootings. And I'll tell you something else, Chris.
Please.
It's not only the loss of life. We have 40,000 people who die a year from gun violence. It is not only the horrible massacres. You know what it is? It is kids who go to school terrified. I was in New Hampshire before Christmas. Never forget this. And a woman says, Bernie, what should I tell my daughter when she wants me to buy her a bulletproof backpack? We have got to do an enormous amount of work on this issue. I think we have got to do an enormous amount of work on this issue. I think the American people are coming together. As president, unlike Trump, unlike the Republican leadership, I will not allow the NRA to call the tune on this issue.
All right. Let's bring in Cheryl Stockford. She's a social worker and Cheryl Stockford. She is a social worker, healthcare management from North Charleston. She's leaning toward supporting you. Cheryl.
Come on.
Hi there. Let me be the first to welcome you to Charleston.
Thank you very much.
We're so glad you're here. Bernie, could you please share how you will allay the fears
I'm gonna
of
get
those
around
who
this
see
with
your
tour guard.
political ideology as too extreme? How do you respond to Americans who believe we need to beat Trump more than we need extreme political policies?
Thank you very much, Cheryl, for that question. And you're quite right. I think
It may cut out in a minute, by the way,
not
but we'll be
only
back.
virtually all Democrats, a whole lot of independents, and some Republicans understand that it is absolutely imperative that we defeat this extremely dangerous president. So I'm happy to tell you for a start that if you look at the polling out there, and polls go up and polls go down, but almost all of the polls nationally have me defeating Trump.
True.
If you look
That's
at
as
just
of
polls
today.
that came out a few days ago
saw
on
those.
Sunday, I think it was CBS, I am beating Trump in Michigan, beating Trump in Pennsylvania, beating Trump in Wisconsin. I think we're tied in Florida. And I think, Cheryl, that we are the strongest campaign because we have the energy and the excitement that we need to create the largest voter turnout in the history of this country, which is exactly what we need in order to defeat Trump. So
30 seconds left on the preview. We'll see.
Our campaign is doing, and I think doing quite well, I think you saw that in Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, is we are reaching out to working people, many of whom have become very disillusioned with the political process. They're hurting, and they're saying, you know what, the political establishment is not feeling my pain. They don't know what's going on in my life. We are reaching out to those people. We are reaching out big time to young people.
Oh, I said big
And
time.
if we can bring young people, black and white and Latino, Native American, Asian American, young people into the political process in the numbers that I think we can.
Oh, okay, there it goes. Give me 1 sec to see if I can fire this up. I have an idea to get around this. Anyways, pretty good so far. I mean, it's his usual stuff, right? His gun control. Although I didn't. So one thing that he mentioned there, which is kind of interesting, which is a change, is that he's always had the stance that gun manufacturers shouldn't be punished for shooting issues. Now, I don't disagree with that. To me, it's sort of is akin to if you go out and get in your car and run into somebody, is the manufacturer of the car responsible? Now, I realize the argument to that is, well, cars aren't made to murder people. Some. You know, I don't want to say that all guns are only made to murder people. That's not fair. But I have a tough time going to, are the manufacturers responsible for it? I that seems like a bridge too far almost. I'm trying to find a stream of this because this login information is not working. Let me see if I can find something for us. Or can I just load up the CNN.com thing again and be like, yo, that's saying I cannot. What about if I do this? I bet it allows me. Hang on, I'm trying to like reload the music here. I think my internet stopped and I tried to connect to the tour guard. I don't know why it's not back. Yeah, tour guard is not on. 1 sec. Click refresh. Okay. Uno momento, friendos. But yeah, anyways, I never really agreed with that stance of his. I'm sorry, I did agree with that stance. I did hear that he just mentioned that he was going to join the group to sign it, to join the exception group or something. I don't know if that's the right move either. Why can't I get this disabled off my computer now? What's happening? I'm having a tour guard problem. By the way, if you're looking for a VPN service, I cannot suggest TourGuard highly enough. It is a fantastic service. I use it quite a bit, and for some reason, my failed login attempt has caused my internet to think it is half in a VPN right now, or something is going on. There it goes. Let's try again. There we go. Music coming right back while I see if I can get this stuff loaded from CNN. And I'm sorry if I missed any messages. That internet outage probably caused me to miss some. See if I can get this loaded on this browser, and then we might just rotate through browsers. Oh, God damn it. I gotta turn off that Windows shake thing. I move a window too fast and all my windows close. Bernie Sanders Town Hall. Let's watch Bernie Sanders Town Hall, please. Let me see. Damn it. This login information is not working. See if I get the preview over here on a different browser, since TourGuard doesn't want to work either. Oh, I guess it is working. Okay. We'll just bounce between browsers then.
As you know, under Medicare, you go to any doctor you want. It's not government run.
Let's listen in.
You go to any hospital you want. And we continue what you have right now. What is changing is that instead of having thousands of private health insurance programs in which we spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars to administer, we expand Medicare over a 4-year period to provide health care to every man, woman, and child in this country. And this is what I want to say on this issue, which I've studied a whole lot. Right now, we are spending twice as much per person on health care as do the people of any other country. Twice as much. Now, you might think that when you spend twice as much, we have, wow, what an incredible health care system we have. We don't. Despite spending $11,000 for every man, woman, and child, we have 87 million Americans who are uninsured and underinsured with high deductibles and high copayment. At a minimum, and this is conservative, 30,000 people in our country die each year because they don't have insurance, they don't get to a doctor when they should. By the time they get to the doctor, situation is too late.
Doctor.
In America, as everybody knows, we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs because we have a corrupt, uncontrolled pharmaceutical industry which charges us any price they can get away with, in some cases 10 times more than the Canadians or Europeans or Mexicans pay for the same exact drug. And I want you all to hear this one, because this is an indication of how cruel this system is. In America today, 500,000 people go bankrupt because of medically related bills. What kind of system do we have when you're struggling with cancer, which should be enough to keep you occupied? When you're struggling with cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's,
so pretty.
Your family faces financial ruin. That is a disgrace. That should not be happening in America. So all we are doing...
Look at those girls like, yep.
all we are doing here is it's not a radical proposal. We're doing what every other major country does around the world. And by the way, when you get rid of the profiteering of the healthcare industry, when you get rid of the incredibly complicated Byzantine administrative system, everybody here has had to argue with the insurance companies about whether you get the coverage you thought you paid for. We're going to save substantial sums of money. Recent study from Yale says $450 billion a year. We guarantee health care to all people. We save the average person substantial sums of money on the cost of health care.
Next question comes from Emmanuel Ferguson. He's an attorney, former federal prosecutor. Emmanuel is the second vice chair of the Charleston County Democrats, is likely supporting former VP Joe Biden. Emmanuel.
Good evening, sir. I am really excited about getting a Democrat in office.
I like that sweater.
And when I hear you
a lot.
speak, I get really excited. But I remember that Trump excited his base with a promise to build a wall with no real plan to pay for it. Your plan for free college tuition and Medicare for all seems like a way to excite the Democratic base, but with no real plan to pay for it. Now, how is your position in your campaign different than what Donald Trump did?
Oh, I think, you know, given the fact that I've spent my entire adult life fighting against everything that Trump stands for, trust me, we're a little bit different.
But when I hear,
here's what I want to do. First, I'm going to give this to you. I thought that question might come up. All right, here it is. This is a list which will be on our website tonight of how we pay for every program that we have developed.
Hey, sweet.
Okay. But let me give you some examples. Okay, you asked a good question. Here's the answer. You're right. I believe that we should make public colleges and universities tuition free, because in the year 2020, when we live in a competitive global economy, I want all of our kids, regardless of income, to be able to get that higher education, college or trade schools. By the way, I also believe we should cancel all student debt in America. Okay. Now, you're smiling and you say, well, that's a great idea. How does he pay for it, right? Did I read your mind on that one? Yeah. Okay. And the answer is, I'll tell you exactly how we pay for it. We pay for it through a rather modest tax on Wall Street speculation. That is how we pay for that. All right? You will remember 12 years ago, the Congress, against my vote, bailed out the crooks on Wall Street who nearly destroyed this economy. I think a modest tax on Wall Street speculation right now to make sure all of our kids who have the ability and the desire get the education they need is something that we should do.
You're slick giving me this piece of paper.
I know.
I couldn't pay attention. The criticism is there is a lot of detail in here. You can look for it for yourselves on the website. It is not matching the price tag that some put at about $30 trillion for the Medicare for all transition. You do have lots of different ideas in here. I'm not saying you don't. But you get about halfway there. No. The question becomes, how do you get the rest of the way? Well,
we get there. You know, there was a study, Chris, I don't know if you happen to see it. I don't know if anyone...
30 trillion over 10 years.
A study came out from Yale University, a number of epidemiologists, a really quite good study, published in Lancet, which is, you know, a major medical journal. What they said is when you get rid of all of the administrative waste that we have now, having to administer, can you believe that thousands and thousands of separate plans? You have a $5,000 deductible, you have a $10,000, you're in this, that, you're in that, you're covered with this prescription drug, you got that. It is a disaster. When you get rid of all of that administrative waste, which other countries do, when you get rid of the profiteering of the drug companies, we can, in fact, pay for Medicare for all and substantially lower the cost for the average American worker. Now, you want to know how we're going to pay for it? Well, we can go on for several hours very briefly. Number one, for the average person, how do we pay for it today, Chris? You know how we pay for it? The average family in America makes about $60,000 a year. That family is paying premiums, deductibles, out-of-pocket expenses, and co-payments. That $60,000 a year family is now paying $12,000 a year for health care. It's an outrageous sum of money, about 20% of the family's income.
I don't see
what
on the
we
website
do,
yet,
among other proposals in there, is to say, all right, you are that average $60,000 a year family. You're going to pay a 4% tax, exempting the first $29,000, leaving $31,000 of taxable dollars, which is about $1,200 a year. A heck of a lot better than what you're paying today. We also have a payroll tax. We have a payroll tax on employers, which will save them substantial sums of money. Because remember, under Medicare for all, no more premiums for the worker or the employer, no more out-of-pocket expenses, no more deductibles, no more out-of-pocket expenses. And because we're taking on the greed of the pharmaceutical industry, nobody in America under Medicare for all pays more than $200 a year for prescription drugs.
The point was just the math on how much number you added up in the proposal, but this is for something for you guys to decide. And here's another question from the audience. I want to bring in Matthew Gripe, a recently retired U.S. Navy lieutenant commander. He is undecided. Thank you for your service. Matthew, your question.
Yes, sir. Senator Sanders, How will you approach the Democratic convention if you do not have the necessary delegates to win on the first ballot, but you do have an overwhelming plurality among the candidates?
Thanks for the question, Matthew. That's an issue that has been discussed. Who knows what's going to happen? We can't predict the future. But if I or anybody else goes into the Democratic convention with a substantial plurality, I believe that individual, me or anybody else, should be the candidate of the Democratic Party. And I'll tell you why, Matthew. I will tell you why.
I was going to ask him, that's how the system
It
works,
will
though.
be incredibly divisive for the Democratic Party if a candidate who has won the support of people all over the country. This is a hard-fought process here. We're competing in every state in this country. All of the candidates are working really hard. And if one candidate comes out on top to say to the country, you voted for that candidate, oh, but by the way, we don't think that candidate should be the nominee, I think that will be a serious, serious problem for the Democratic Party.
It would be
I
very
think
bad.
it will wreak havoc
It would be very bad
on that person's campaign.
All right, let's take a break. We come back. We have a lot more questions for Senator.
Not only just the campaign, right? Like, it wouldn't just wreak havoc on the campaign, it would wreak havoc on the entire party for the future. If let me switch, by the way, while I switch browsers here. They're on a break, so it's pretty good timing. So one of the things that happened in like 1978, if some people don't remember or don't follow along with history and all that kind of stuff, the Democratic National Convention was actually contested then as well. It was contested by 4 different people. One was Robert F. Kennedy, McCarthy, it was Kennedy, McCarthy, Johnson, and Humphrey. Johnson and Humphrey got like 10% of the vote. Robert F. Kennedy and McCarthy got like 40%. So it was obvious winner sort of there, right? Well, what happened was, and by the way, Kennedy and McCarthy were pretty left-leaning. They were more progressive. The more centrist candidate was Johnson and Humphrey. So they were more center ground. And they had significantly less votes, by the way, less delegates. So it came to the floor, but like a week before then, Robert F. Kennedy was killed. So that basically took him out of the running, but we still had McCarthy, who had a plurality. Well, it went to the floor, and the DNC decided to give the nomination to Humphrey, who had very low votes, but he was a centrist. He was more establishment candidate. And if you look up what happened in that convention, literally on the convention floor, there was riots. They had to call the police and all this kind of stuff because everyone's like, how are you going to, it's like stealing the election from somebody. And what was the result of that? We ran that person against Richard Nixon, and Nixon won by a lot. So there is precedent here where if you go to a brokered convention and give it to not the leader, it will be bad for everyone. Now, I did clear browser cache. We'll see if this pops up. Of course it doesn't. Let's switch one more time to this. Is that logging my IP when it does that? That's how I was doing it. Someone find me a ripped stream, like something like a Pirate Bay stream or whatever, a torrent stream. We'll do it one more time on this browser, and then once this is done, I will hopefully have a solution for you so you can watch the remainder of it. He's only on for an hour, so if anything, we might miss a last half hour. I wanted to watch Pete as well, but if I can't figure out a way to actually watch it in full length, then there's no point. An error has occurred. What? Preview. Okay. Looks like we're going to get it. And of course, we get it for some commercials. So we'll leave this go. When Bernie gets back on, it'll be good. If someone can find me a ripped link, that would be the best. I'm still looking. Stream Town Hall. This is our Republican, our Democrats. Watch live streamed. Okay, let's see here. Democrats has nothing right now. Let's 22 says agree. Sotomayor Facebook. Anyway, nothing with the actual town hall link, huh? It's pretty surprising that this is not out there. Let me try. I'm looking for another thing here. What's the name of that NFL site? I wonder if they have something. Give me a 1 sec. NFL. NFL Streams was banned from Reddit, of course. There was a new site. What was the name of that new site? It was like Byte something, right? Oh, we're back.
South Carolina. Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get right back to the audience. We have a question here from a young man named Peter Beck, high school student, undecided. Peter.
Good evening, Senator Sanders. In the past month, news has come out that both elements of the Republican Party and Russian interests are supporting your bid for the Democratic nomination. How do you respond to those that say that a successful nomination from you would be a victory for Republicans and Russia while a defeat for the Democratic Party?
That's nonsense.
Don't quite see it that way. I think if there is a candidate who loves Mr. Putin, who sees him as his best friend, that is the President of the United States, not me.
That's for sure.
I happen to believe that Putin is a dangerous autocrat. Unlike President Trump, I think he meddled very heavily in the 2016 election. And if by any chance Mr. Putin is watching this show, Mr. Putin, you ain't gonna meddle in American elections when I'm President of the United States.
He loves Mr. Castro. Come on now. You know better than that, Gabe.
Second of all, there are differences of opinion within the intelligence community of the role that Russia is playing. But there's no question that in 2016, they meddled in our election. And you know what they do? The ugliest thing that they do is try to divide us up. And they're very smart at it. They are really smart at it. They know those points that can bring people apart. And obviously, in this country, my job, if elected president, is to bring us together, not continue this divisiveness.
A quick follow on that in terms of decency. You suggested that some of the harassment from the so-called Bernie bros on Twitter might be Russian interference.
Yes.
Is that what the U.S. intel folks told you?
No, that's what was classified. I don't want to get into it, but it wasn't that. But here's what it was, Chris. Look, we have millions of followers, and I'm not going to tell you that we don't have some jerks out there. But I do want to say to those folks, we do not want your support. If you think that what our campaign is about is making ugly attacks on other candidates, we don't want you. You're not part of us.
We don't want you.
And I want to say also, because I see one of our main surrogates, Nina Turner, here, and you can talk to her later on, Senator Turner, about the ugly and racist attacks that have come into our campaign. My wife is here. All right? So if anyone thinks it's just our campaign, you're deadly mistake. Now, in terms of why I believe it is possible the Russians are playing a role, we had a disagreement with the Culinary Workers Union in Nevada.
Right.
They're a great union. We disagreed on healthcare issues. There were some really ugly attacks against the leadership. I have perhaps the strongest lifetime pro-union voting record of any member of the Congress. Does anyone really think who's a supporter of mine that they would make ugly attacks against really excellent trade union leaders? It just seemed to me kind of fishy. That was my suspicion.
So it's fishy, so you were assuming it might be Russia.
Might be. I didn't say it was definitive.
And if it isn't, it's just people who are saying things you don't like, you tell them you don't want their support.
You got it. You got it. Look, there's too much ugliness, too much division. 99.9% of our supporters are fantastic people. Go to the rallies that we have. These are
I think I found a way to stream it, by the way.
For justice, they're
the
standing up for
distraction.
racial justice, economic justice, environmental justice. They are great people. I'll tell you, I get inspired. You know, we just came from a rally the other day in Austin. We had 13,000 people out, just beautiful people. But if we have people who are ugly and attack in a vicious way, we don't want your support. That's it.
All right, let's get another question.
Okay, hang on. We're going to switch over real quick to this. This is the question. We'll see it at the bottom of the screen.
Word socialism.
Well,
okay.
It's democratic socialism.
There it is.
And the policies that we are advocating are policies that exist all over the world. Okay. And what that means is I happen to believe, as a democratic socialist, that health care is a human right, that all of our people deserve coverage. I happen to believe that in the richest country in the history of the world, education is a human right. It is a disgrace. We have today a child care system that is absolutely dysfunctional. It is absolutely unaffordable for so many working families, all right? So, yeah, I believe in universal, high-quality child care. I believe in tripling funding for low-income Title I schools so that we have the best public education in the world, okay? I believe in those things. I believe that in a nation which has more income and wealth inequality today than any time in 100 years, when the very, very rich are getting phenomenally richer, we should not have 500,000 people sleeping out on the streets tonight. So, what I wanted to say, if I could, Chris, in response to that very good question, is in many respects, we are living in a socialist society today.
This is a good idea of attack, by the way.
When Donald Trump was a private real estate developer in New York City, he received $800 million. A billionaire received $800 million in subsidies and tax breaks. That's called corporate socialism. Amazon is a corporation that made $11 billion last year in profit, owned by the wealthiest guy in the United States. Anyone here know how much they paid in federal income taxes? They paid zero. The Walton family owns Walmart. The Walton family is the wealthiest family in America. They pay their workers starvation wages. Many of those workers are forced to go on Medicaid, food stamps, and public housing. Who pays for that? You do. The middle class does. So you are subsidizing the wealthiest family in America. That's called corporate socialism. What I want is a democratic socialism that works for working families, not just billionaires.
That's a really good way to explain it, by the way.
I'll take one more step down the road of the stigma that's coming from some of your fellow Democrats. You said on 60 Minutes this weekend, it is unfair to simply say everything is bad with the way Fidel Castro ruled in Cuba.
Oh, here you go, Gabe.
Democratic members of Congress who represent Cuban Americans in Florida, obviously you got to win there. They're attacking your comment as absolutely unacceptable, singing the praises of a murderous tyrant. Response.
The response was when Fidel Castro first came to power, which was when? 59? Does that sound right?
59-60.
Okay. You know what he did? He initiated a major literacy program. There was a lot of folks in Cuba at that point who were illiterate. And he formed the literacy brigade. You may read that. He went out and they helped people learn to read and write. You know what? I think teaching people to read and write is a good thing. I have been extremely consistent and critical of all authoritarian regimes all over the world, including Cuba, including Nicaragua, including Saudi Arabia, including China, including Russia. I happen to believe in democracy, not authoritarianism. But, you know, you can't say China is another example, all right? China is an authoritarian country, becoming more and more authoritarian. But can anyone deny, I mean, the facts are clear, that they have taken more people out of extreme poverty than any country in history. Do I get criticized because I say that? That's the truth. So that is the fact. End of discussion.
So to the Democrats
there it is.
Who say, you don't say good things about Fidel Castro. He destroyed freedoms in that country. He picked winners and losers and killed them and put them in prison forever. You don't give him a pat on the back for anything.
You don't give, it's not a question. Truth is truth. All right?
It's a fact.
Now, if you want to disagree with me, if somebody wants to say that, and by the way, all of those Congress people that you mentioned just so happen to be supporting other candidates, just accidentally, no doubt. coincidentally. But, you know, the truth is the truth. And that's what happened in the first years of the Castro regime.
All right, another question. Adam Dombey, history
That's a
professor
reasonable
at the
answer.
College of Charleston, recently published a book about white supremacy and the Confederacy. He previously supported Julian Castro, now undecided. Professor.
Thank you. Obviously, Confederate symbols are controversial right now, and here in Charleston, it remains an important issue, especially in light of the terrorist attack in 2015. How should we deal with the Confederate flag and Confederate monuments? What is your take on them? And how do we improve race relations?
Good, thank you. Thank you very much for that question. You know, a lot about Donald Trump sickens me, but maybe at the top of the list is his very intentional effort to try to divide us up based on the color of our skin or where we were born or our religion or our sexual orientation, even our gender. As you know, before Trump became president, he was a leader of the so-called birther movement. Remember that? This was a disgusting effort to try to delegitimize the first African-American president in the history of our country, Barack Obama. That was the effort. It wasn't to criticize Obama. It wasn't to attack Obama. It was to say this guy Obama wasn't even born in America. Shouldn't be the president of the United States. So let me say this. I see, especially coming after Trump, the most important thing that we can do as a nation is everything possible to end all forms of discrimination in this country. Right now, we are dealing, as everybody knows, we're dealing with systemic racism.
I don't think he answered the flag
We have
question.
a wealth gap in this country. I don't know if everybody knows that, where white families are now worth 10 times more than black families, where black women are 3 times more likely to die than white women in childbirth, where the infant mortality rate in the black community is much higher, where there's discrimination in housing, where there's discrimination in education, all right? And clearly one of the main goals and one of the main priorities of a Sanders administration is to do everything humanly possible to end racism in America, to end sexism in America, to end homophobia in America, and we're seeing a rise in religious bigotry as well. We are one people. Dr. Martin Luther King reminded us in a very profound way that we judge human beings not by the color of their skin or other superficialities. We look at people. We judge people based on their character. And that is the goal of my administration.
I don't think he answered the flag question.
That was relevant in the aftermath of the shooting here. The role of statues and icons of Confederates. Then Governor Nikki Haley later would say that people had hijacked the meaning of the Confederate battle flag when other people just thought it meant sacrifice and heritage. What do they mean to you?
Well, that's what it means. I mean, that's what it does mean now. So I support, look, I think these relics might be placed in museums, but I don't want kids coming out and saying, looking at a statue of somebody who believed in slavery. Those are not.
It's interesting. So museums, though.
You know, I understand history, and you can't wipe out history, and I don't want to wipe out history. You know, and those places should be placed in historical locations. But on town greens, we want kids to look up and say, wow, this was somebody who was a great leader for liberation. This was somebody who believed in racial justice, somebody who fought for working people, somebody who believed in women's rights. Those are the people we want our kids to learn from and to respect, not people who believed and defended slavery.
That's a great pivot. That's a great dodge.
For a nonprofit lender here in Charleston, a supporter of yours. Vicki.
Good evening, Senator Sanders. Given your recent health scare, do you plan on announcing your choice of running mate soon, as this may alleviate some of the fears about your ability to hold office, and also to announce any of those duties that those may fall to?
All right. As you know, I had a heart attack. And bottom line is I'm feeling fine. Follow me around the campaign trail. I think we did 3 rallies yesterday, and so I'm feeling very, very good. But your question is about a vice presidential part of the ticket. And yes, the answer is we will do that, but it's a little bit presumptuous right now. I will tell you one thing, though, is that person will not be an old white guy. That I can say definitively. Right? And I do want to say this, in all seriousness, that our cabinet and our administration will very intentionally look like America. So when you turn on...
That's a good answer.
I think it's important that all of our people see themselves reflected in the administration of the President of the United States, and we will absolutely do that.
All right, let's take a quick break. We have more with Senator Bernie Sanders right after this.
Pretty good. Early thoughts are welcome, but that wasn't too bad. I thought, honestly, when that guy asked the question about the Confederate flag and some of the statues down there, that was a great question. And I wonder if that was like a trap question where someone's like, I got a good question that might throw him off a little bit, because Bernie did look a little like, oh, shit, I didn't think of this one. I think he avoided the answer the first time. The host did a great job of coming back in and saying, okay, but he's talking about the idols and the flag, all that stuff. And basically was trying to hold Bernie's feet to the fire, which he did. And that's his role. That host did a good job. Bernie, though, did a good job coming back to it, saying like they should be placed in museums because they're a part of history, right? Which is very true. You can't, slavery was this awful, black mark on American society and American history. You don't want to forget that it happened, though, right? Like, it's a part of our history. It was fucking terrible. We have since moved on from that and gotten better and, all this stuff. So I think placing them in museums like he's suggesting is a good idea. Like this was a part of our history. But he's right in saying let's replace them with, statues and idols and things that kids can be proud of and excited about. And, what was her name? I'm sorry, the NASA mathematician that died today. Like first female African-American mathematician at NASA or something like that. And she died today, like 101, I think I saw. Like, let's get statues like that up, like something awesome. You know what I mean? Instead of old Confederate war generals or whatever. It's not I don't know. Yeah, Captain something. You're right. Yeah, I can't remember her last name, and I feel a little bit ashamed about that as I work at NASA. Plenty of trap questions here. I don't. Yeah, you're right, Spooky. That was definitely a trap one. The Biden one was a little bit of a trap one. I did like that someone asked him about the how are you going to pay for Medicare for all. He's like, blah, here you go. By the way, he said it's going to be available later on his website. If anyone missed it, someone asked Bernie how he was going to pay for Medicare for all, which is obviously a big concern. It's a concern for people that are Bernie supporters, right? But he pulled out a sheet of paper out of his pocket, handed one copy to the host and said, here's the plan. It'll be on the website later. So if you guys are watching BernieSanders.com, you can presume it'll be there somewhere. I've been refreshing. I don't see anything. He said tonight. So that obviously could be much later. It's possible that he wants to be after Pete's town hall just to throw everybody off or whatever. Don't give them time to respond. That could be a tactical deployment type thing. I'm looking. I don't see any new information on the site. So it's not up yet. But it will be later. If you're interested in how he's going to pay for it, BernieSanders.com, it should be there. But yeah, I think he's doing pretty well tonight. He's very, personable. You know what I mean? He's not robotic. And by the way, I haven't watched a Pete town hall yet. We're going to watch a little bit of it after Sanders. Pete's on right afterwards. So that'll be interesting to see kind of how he talks. From what I hear, Pete's a little more relatable at the town halls than he is on the debate stage. The debate stage, he feels a little robotic and things. And at the town hall, he's more like maybe it's a relaxation thing. Like I get it, you know. So let's tune into the second, or this might be the third half. Yeah, this is the end.
Welcome back to a CNN presidential town hall with Senator
Probably
Bernie
one more question and
Sanders.
it's over.
We're live in Charleston, South Carolina. Senator, thank you for joining us. All right, a front-runner question for you. Joe Biden's campaign released an ad criticizing you for reportedly considering a primary challenge against President Barack Obama in 2012. Their quote, "When it comes to building on Obama's legacy, Bernie Sanders cannot be trusted." Did you consider that?
No. And I like Joe. Joe is a friend of mine. I've known him for many years. But you know what happens in campaigns? At the end of the season, it's called silly season. And people say things they should not say. In 2012, I was very busy running for re-election to the United States Senate from the state of Vermont. That's what I was focusing on. In fact, I ended up campaigning for Obama, and I'm a strong supporter of all that Barack Obama has accomplished.
Give you full benefit of response. The Atlantic had the reporting. They published an initial report that said then Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid had to talk you out of it.
No, not true at all. And I call up Harry, and he will deny that. There's another one that involves Senator Leahy. He will deny it as well. Just wasn't true. I did not give any consideration. You know, I'm the senator from a small state, and I did not give any consideration to running for president of the United States until 2015. And that was, I was looking around, and I thought that the working families of this country needed a progressive voice. And the truth is, as you will recall, Chris, there was a lot of discussion about Elizabeth Warren running for president, and I waited. And Senator Warren said, no, she's not going to run. I did run. But the idea of running in 2012, absolutely untrue.
I think one of the first times you ever yelled at me was when I asked you in an interview on New Day, if you believe in this so strongly, why don't you run for president? That's when you yelled at me.
There you go. All right.
Another question, Dylan Harris, a student at the College of Charleston who was supporting Andrew Yang, now undecided. Dylan.
Senator Sanders, why does your current climate change proposal involve phasing out nuclear energy when it currently accounts for 20% of all U.S. energy and 50% of our carbon-free energy?
Okay.
Good question.
Right. And the answer is that right now, we do not know how to get rid of the nuclear waste that is out there, waste that is going to be around for a very, very, very long time. As you know, the Congress thought about Yucca Mountain in Nevada. I don't believe that that is going to happen. So right now, all over the country, including my own state of Vermont, we have nuclear waste alongside a plant that has since been shut down right by the Connecticut River. Not a good place for it. And all over this country, you have nuclear waste which is stored in places that are not particularly safe. So I don't know how we can build more nuclear plants when we don't know how to get rid of the waste that we have. Second of all, in terms of the construction of new nuclear plants, you may or may not know that they are far, far, far more expensive than investing in wind, solar, and other sustainable energies.
All right, our next question is from Izzy Smith. Is that right? Is that who we have up?
Izzy?
No, we're going to go to, let's look around. Who do we want? Somebody's got to want a question. We got all kinds of people lined up. Who do you want, Senator? You want to go right? You want to go left? Done. Beverly Bolliard, it's good to have you. A former middle school teacher turned law student at Charleston School of Law, a supporter of yours. Beverly, thank you for being patient. What's your question?
Thank you. Senator Sanders, this May I will be graduating from law school with over $250,000 in student loan debt, the majority from my undergraduate education. What is your plan to help students like me with student loan debt, and how do you plan to pay for it?
Thank you, Beverly. Our campaign is asking the American people to think outside of the box. What Beverly just described is insane. That's what it is. What crime did she commit? She wanted to get an education. This is the wealthiest country on earth. People should not have to go $250,000 in debt to get an education. All right?
Who disagrees with that?
And that is why I have proposed, and will fight for, a proposal that imposes a modest tax on Wall Street speculation. We bailed those guys out 12 years ago. And a modest tax on Wall Street speculation will pay for making public colleges and universities tuition-free and canceling all student debt.
Quick question for you.
Yeah.
So cost of college, real issue. Cost of financing and what kind of rules they can have, that's one issue. What do you say to the families out there who say, we worked really hard, we stretched so that our kids didn't have to take the same amount of loans, or they didn't take loans, and now you're asking me to help pay back other people's loans when I didn't take them? How do you address that population?
I'm not asking. This is going to be a tax on Wall Street speculation, and it exempts all those middle-income people who might be impacted. Look, Chris, here is, maybe the bottom line of this whole discussion. I wish we had an hour to get into it. Today in America, we have massive levels of income and wealth inequality, all right? You got the top 1% owning more wealth than the bottom 92%. We don't talk about this on TV too much. It's true. You got 3 people owning more wealth than the bottom half of America. You got the top 1% earning 49% of all new income. And I happen to believe, and I say this unapologetically, and I know that's why Wall Street gets a little bit nervous, and the 1% get a little bit nervous, that at a time when wages for the American people for the last 45 years have been flat, average American worker in real inflation accounted for dollars, not making a nickel more than he or she did 45 years ago. Meanwhile, over the last 30 years, top 1% have seen a $21 trillion increase in their wealth. You know what? I do believe it is time to tax the very, very rich and to tax large corporations who are making big profits. That is what I believe.
I want to get to another question because it's an important one, okay? And we only have a couple of minutes. Okay. Benjamin Sackler is a student at the College of Charleston. He's a supporter of yours. Important question.
Hey, Bernie. How's it going? As a young Jewish person, the rise of such a historic political figure like yourself is awe-inspiring. What does your Jewish identity mean to you, and why would it be significant for you to be the first Jewish president in the history of our nation?
Well, thank you. I'll tell you, as I think Chris knows, the media knows, I don't like to get into personal stuff too much. I can remember very vividly, as a kid, looking at picture books about what happened in the Holocaust. As it happens, my father's family was wiped out by Hitler. My brother and I and our wives went to Poland, to the town that he was born in. He fled terrible poverty and anti-Semitism. And there they took us, very nice people in the town, they took us to a place where the Nazis had the people dig a grave, and they shot them all, 300 people in there. I think the lesson that I learned from that, and in the neighborhood that I grew up, there were people who had tattoos on their arms for having been in concentration camps. I learned at a very early age what, if you like, white nationalism, which is what Nazism is in the extreme, is about. And I think at a very early age, I learned that it is absolutely imperative, not just me, that all of us do everything we can to end all forms of racism and white nationalism. That is, I think, what my experience says, how it has impacted me.
Senator Sanders, thank you very much. A thanks for Senator Sanders from Vermont. Coming up next, former Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
All right, Pete's up next.
I'll be back with Businessman
Someone else waiting for him, so we might not get a chance to talk real quick. But one thing I want to quickly mention, they mentioned one of the questions. I actually got into it today with some friends, by the way, having this discussion. So let's say that I'm someone who paid off all my student loan debt, and now you're canceling everyone else's student loan debt. How is that fair to me? And my response to that is that it's not about fair to you. Like, yeah, you had to scrimp and save to pay it off, but that doesn't mean that everyone else should go through the hardship that you went through. Why would you wish that on someone? But just for total transparency, I went to school, to an expensive school. I had about $89,000 of student loans. When I came out of school, my student loan monthly payment was $950 a month, just for my student loans. I got a job in New Jersey at a contractor there, and my rent was $750 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. Between those two, it was almost unmanageable. almost. I'm very fortunate and worked very hard to have a decent job when I came out, and I was able to afford that. But there's no way that I could have afforded, you know, a new car or a home or a family, and that's just like, I can't understand how some people can look at that and go, well, I paid, so everyone else also has to pay. Otherwise, it's unfair to me. Number one, life isn't fair. That's nothing in life is real fair. Number two, what kind of person would say, because I went through hardship, you have to go through hardship as well? Who would wish that on someone? I have 2 children. Do I wish that both of my 2 children were also almost $100,000 in debt from school? Because I was? Why would I? That's psychotic. What? It's not even a logical train of thought. It's absurd. It's silly to think that you're owed something because you paid. Tough. I don't. It's crazy to even think about that. I wanted to mention that because I actually had that talk with someone today. I had the same response to them. It just that selfish attitude makes no sense to me. But I'll also say to someone that is considering that, maybe forgiving all student loan debt is not a good idea because they, took on loans full well knowing, what kind of agreement they were getting into. That could be. I think a lot of times children, which these people are when they take these loans out, they're children, aren't thinking clearly about the ramifications of the future. There's not a lot of high school classes that teach interest accruement and budgeting. There's no classes like that. Everyone knows that. There should be in high school. I don't know if people are thinking clearly where, let's say that I was in that position again and all my student loans were forgiven and I paid $0. Instead of $950 a month, I paid $0. That means that my rent would be the highest payment back then, so it was $1,750, and I had an extra almost $1,000 a month. Do you think I'm going to squirrel that away and save that? I'll be spending that out in the market. I'll be buying things, cars, homes, whatever, goods on the market. That stimulates the economy, this extra money. These students, when they have their student loans forgiven, they're not going to just save, their money in their mattress. They're going to be spending it on trying to advance their lives. I'm sorry, I don't understand it. I will hear the argument that it will be expensive. I'll hear that. I'll hear the argument that maybe you don't believe that it can be paid for. I'll hear that argument. I'm excited to see Bernie Sanders' plan to see how everything's paid for. That's for sure. We'll look at that on the show if I see it posted. But what I can't understand is like some moral authority on how others should be horrifically in debt and have their lives be difficult because of it. It's just absurd. Pete's about to start. I'm excited to check him out on the town hall. I haven't done it yet. Let's look at it.
John Lemon, and good evening from Memminger Auditorium. We're excited to have you here. In just a few days, voters here are going to put their stamp on.
One of the issues I have with Pete is that he's a lot of times he just talks like around an issue and talks in like fluffy words and doesn't really answer tough questions. We'll see. This is the only time Bernie talks in lies. He knows better. Wait, this is the only time Bernie talks in lies. He knows better. He just cannot say the DNC rigged the election. Oh, I see. Yeah, that wasn't great last time, huh? Let's check out Pete.
Mayor Pete, the crowd loves you. We can see.
The crowd loves you.
They loved you in Indiana. They loved you in Iowa. They loved you in New Hampshire. You ran neck and neck with Senator Bernie Sanders there. But he pulled away from you guys in Nevada, and where he was a clear front runner. Tomorrow night on the debate stage, you're going to have the chance to stop his momentum. How are you going to do that?
Well, by making the case for how we will defeat Donald Trump. Look, I believe in a politics that brings as many people in as possible. I believe in calling people into the tent, not calling them names online. And it's going to be more important than ever that we build a coalition that can invite people, not just fellow diehard Democrats, but independents. I'm even seeing what I call future former Republicans who are not going to agree with me on everything, but they're disgusted with what's going on in this White House. You don't have to be a liberal Democrat to have trouble looking your kids in the eye and explaining this president to them. But in order to do any of that, We have to be building a kind of politics that's about that inclusive victory, not about a rigid ideology. And if we have ever had an election that America cannot afford for us to lose, it's this one. So that's the case.
Actually, it was probably last one.
And at the end of the day, most Democrats are looking for a different answer than what Senator Sanders is offering.
Okay, I have to be honest. You're being awfully polite because you have said that Senator Sanders is polarizing and inflexible. But you said that he was toxic, divisive, and polarizing, I should say. Excuse me. You don't still believe that?
No, I stand by everything that I've said about this. Look, I respect Senator Sanders. I've enjoyed getting to know him. But the reality is, the politics he is offering is one that says, if you don't agree with me 100% of the time, you don't even belong at my side. It is about whose help you reject.
Is that what he said?
And at a moment like this where we have such terrible division emanating from the White House, I don't think that it makes sense to match it with a different form of division. And we see that in the tone and the tenor of his campaign and its supporters.
Chris Cuomo just asked him about that earlier, and he called your critique total nonsense. What do you think?
I'm sure he did. I think he's wrong. Look, there's just two fundamentally different ideas about how we're going to deliver the change that we need and how we're going to beat this president. And mine is about drawing people in, not beating people over the head, and telling them, you know, you don't agree with me on everything, you're not ready to go all the way out to this extreme, then you don't even belong in this movement. That's not how I see politics. It's not how I see defeating Donald Trump.
All right, let's move on now. I'm going to bring in Shannon Nees now, a history professor at the College of Charleston. She is currently undecided. Shannon?
Good evening, Mayor Buttigieg. As a presidential candidate, why should people of color, women, and especially women of color like myself,
that
trust
person in the
you?
background?
What steps have you taken to truly understand the systemic forces that work against these people on a day-to-day basis? And what will you do as president to chip away at systemic racism, sexism, and reduce the impact they have on these groups' interactions with law enforcement and government entities?
Thank you, Shannon. Let me begin by acknowledging that asking a woman of color for her vote, asking you for your vote, is a lot to ask. I mean, it is a lot to ask anyone for their vote, but women of color have been the backbone of this campaign, of Democratic campaigns, and of this party. And, you know, this is a vote that has been won within living memory. So it's not just expressing a political preference. It is something that was earned with blood and sweat and tears. I recognize that, and I'm humbled by that. I'm also humbled by the knowledge of the experiences I don't have. When you talk about how to try to get that understanding, I recognize that I will never have the experience of being in an emergency room, for example, as has happened to so many black women, and have my description of being in pain not believed, which is one of the reasons why black women are 3 times as likely to die from complications related to childbirth as white women. Just as I won't have the experience that so many black men have, young black men in particular, of being presumed to be dangerous, just feeling eyes on them as you walk down the street or through a mall, just because of the color of your skin by people who don't know you. I recognize that I don't have that lived experience. And so the question becomes, what can I do to try to reach out to those who do and invite them to shape the vision of my campaign and invite them into shaping the vision of the White House I propose to build? So, for example, our plan for dealing with systemic racism, we call it the Frederick Douglass Plan. I believe we need to take as much intention as went into the Marshall Plan that rebuilt Europe and do it right here at home, dismantling the effects of systemic discrimination in everything from the need for greater economic empowerment for black Americans to housing, health, criminal justice reform, education, voting itself. All of this is connected. Now, this plan is the most comprehensive put forward by any presidential campaign as an agenda for black America. And I'm proud of it. I think it's brilliant. But it's not like I sat in a room and wrote it up. The reason that it's so good is that it was shaped by black voices, and in particular, dealing with the intersection of sexism and racism. These ideas were shaped by those who had lived that. And that is what we need to do in the White House as well. This is not going to get better on its own. And you can't just cross out a racist policy and replace it with a neutral policy and expect things to get better. If we want to get that wealth gap that has been talked about addressed, you can't just expect it to get fixed on its own. It's why we need to proactively co-invest in black-owned businesses. And when I talk to owners of in particular, businesses owned by black women, disproportionately, they say they weren't able to get bank financing. When I always ask it, when I see a small business led by the black women who have the best track record of creating opportunities for others, and I ask them, how'd you get up and running? They almost always say cash, because of these problems in our credit market that systematically make it harder for black entrepreneurs to make it. We could change that, and we have to change that. It's the same with criminal justice. This is a systemic problem that I have been humbled by. The ways in which we have a long way to go in my own city, where I was mayor for 2 terms, are well known. And they have demonstrated to me that nothing will get better without a systemic approach. And it can't just be one person. To me, the biggest lie this president ever told was when he took that stage at the inauguration. And he said, I alone can fix it. I think nobody this side of paradise can fix anything alone. And that will be at the heart of my determination to include the voices of those whose experience I can't not understand from my own life, like the black women who are so systemically harmed by the inequities in this country.
But let me follow up on that, because we are in South Carolina. Yeah. And in 2016, 60% of the Democratic voters were African Americans. You don't have long. You've got 5 days here to show African Americans and to get their support. Yeah. Why you? What do you want African Americans in this state, Democratic voters, to know about you to win them over? What do you want them to know?
Well, first of all, it's not just what's in my plan. Again, I believe that my plans are the most comprehensive for dealing with the effects of systemic racism. But it is my determination to make sure that we actually win so that we can deliver on those plans. I know that nobody is feeling the pain of living under the presidency of Donald Trump more than Americans of color. And so many voters I talk to are laser focused on making sure we defeat this president. And this is our only shot. I have the campaign best positioned to do that, if, of course, we earn that support and earn that vote. And that's what I'm determined to do. And I want in particular, black voters who, again, have been through so much to secure the vote and who have felt their vote taken for granted so often. I want you to know I understand that I am not entitled to it. And as somebody who has the benefit neither of decades of experience, so you can see good, bad, and indifferent, what I've been like for decades, nor the benefit of billions of dollars to get my message out. I understand that all I can do is stand before you in all humility and share what's on my heart as well as what's in my plans.
Right. Ricky Davenport is standing right there. Ricky is a middle school
he didn't do well in Nevada with that.
She's currently undecided, but she's leaning towards you. Ricky?
Good evening. How does being the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, prepare you to be the leader of the entirety of the United States of America? And how will you compensate for your lack of experience in some of the key issues facing America?
Yeah. So it is a leap for anybody to pursue the American presidency. And yet, every single person who's done it has been immortal with a certain amount of experience. Many of them have been senators, and I don't think I'd get that question, of course, if I were a senator. And yet, you could be a very senior senator in our country and have never in your life managed more than 50 people, depending what you were doing before. I believe that while there's no job like president, there's also no job like mayor. When you're a mayor, you are in an arena where you don't just get to talk about issues. You don't just have to try to make sure you vote correctly on them. You are accountable for results for everything good, bad, and ugly that goes on in your community. And what we were able to do in my community was take a city that was being described as dying just a decade ago and guide it out of the legacy of the factory closures that had defined the life of our city and into a brighter future. We took action on racial inequities. We cut black unemployment and black poverty faster than what was happening at the national average. We took action on preparing our city for a better future. And there's one other thing I would say about the relevance of being mayor, which is when you're a mayor, you are a walking symbol of the unity of your city. You never forget that it is your responsibility to call together everybody who's part of the community, even those, especially those, who didn't support you politically. That is also the part of the presidency whose absence is costing us so much under Donald Trump. I believe we need the instincts of a mayor to start getting Washington to work a little more like our best-run cities and towns before the reverse starts happening. And I also recognize that, again, nobody does anything alone. One of the first things you learn as a mayor when you are building your administration is that you need to surround yourself with people who have the relevant experience. I never want to be the smartest person in the room on any subject. And I will always want people who are smarter than me at whatever it is I'm asking them to take charge of.
Standing to your right there is Austin Williams. She is a Charleston native. She won the title of Mrs. America back in 2014. She is now the president and executive director of an anti-human trafficking nonprofit. She is currently undecided, so you have the chance to win her over. Austin?
All right.
Hi, Mayor Pete. Welcome to Charleston.
All right.
This town hall is in the heart of downtown Charleston, but this is not the downtown Charleston that I grew up in, just about 7 blocks away from here. Charleston is filled with working class families, many of whom are being pushed out and priced out, displaced as gentrification spreads in our area. This happens all over the country, especially in brown and black neighborhoods, and I'm wondering, what will you do in order to protect families from being displaced and priced out of their homes?
Well, thank you. This is an example of one of those issues that I was talking about, of racial justice that won't get better without intention and resources. This isn't just going to happen. And by the way, we should remember that a lot of the racial segregation of American neighborhoods happened because of federal policy. The racial discrimination in access to subsidies for housing, for example. So there is an obligation to proactively do something about this. And yet, what we have under this administration, under President Trump, is the reverse. They actually gutted things like the rules that the Obama administration set up on ensuring that communities affirmatively further fair housing. We would reinstate that, and I'm proposing a 21st Century Homestead Act as part of the Douglas Plan. Unlike the original Homestead Act, that largely led to the dispossession of Native Americans. This would be about addressing the situation where you got families, mostly black and brown families, that got redlined into certain neighborhoods, only to face being gentrified right back out of them once the prices go up. And that is why I believe we need federal dollars to allow families who are from historically excluded communities to take title of properties in those communities and hold those neighborhoods in their original character. Again, this is something we've seen in our own community, where public safety, in my view, depends as much on making sure that the neighbors who have been in those homes and in those neighborhoods have a chance to stay there as anything that a police department can do. It's why we directed home repair dollars to disproportionately black neighborhoods in the city of South Bend, knowing that it could make a difference for the stability and character of the neighborhoods. We got to have a higher than ever level of intention, and again, real dollars, in order to address this federally too.
Hey, shortest answer of the night.
I want to bring in Paige Bresler, an assistant accounting professor at the College of Charleston. She's originally from Parkland, Florida. She moved to Charleston 2 years ago, and she is leaning towards supporting you or Vice President Biden, but hasn't decided. Paige.
Hi. My son Jack is currently a senior at Stoneman Douglas High School. It was just 2 years ago I received the kind of news no parent ever wants to hear. 17 people were killed as a result of a mass shooter. If you're elected as president, what steps are you going to take to ensure me and other parents that our children are safe when they attend school? And how do your plans differ from those of the other candidates?
Well, thanks for your question. And no parent should ever go through getting a phone call like that. And no student should be worrying about this the way that so many students across America are. I got a letter from a 14-year-old saying that she's already written out a basic will because she's just that afraid that her next day at school might be her last.
What?
It's hard enough to be in high school without worrying about those kinds of things. And I think everybody old enough to vote or hold a position of responsibility should be handling and taking care of those things so that students don't have to even begin to worry about them. I mean, this is basic. So what does that look like? Well, first of all, let's look at background checks. This is something that the vast majority of not just Democrats, but independents, Republicans, gun owners think we ought to do. because it's common sense. And when we do it,
I mean, we
we should
do
do
have
it
them.
with an attention to the kind of loopholes like the Charleston loophole that allowed the shooter to get a firearm in the horrible killing at Mother Emanuel Church, where if the background check doesn't come back quickly enough, they just give you the firearm. We have to act on that. And the fact that we haven't shows how broken our politics is, and is one of many reasons we need to get rid of the filibuster. That's one of the things that I believe that's different from some of my competitors. I believe that we need red flag laws that can help us deal not only with gun violence in the form of mass shootings and killings, but also suicide, which so many gun suicides are preventable. But we need to empower families who have a concern about somebody to temporarily disarm them through a court order. And when it comes to assault weapons, anything remotely resembling the kind of weaponry I trained on in order to go serve in Afghanistan has no business being sold for profit anywhere near an American school or church or neighborhood.
Laura Lee Worrell is a project manager at the College of Charleston and is currently undecided. Laura Lee?
Good evening. What can you say to die-hard Trump supporters to try to convince them that you are better for this country and for them instead of Trump?
Well, I guess it depends how die-hard they are. We're not going to win over everybody. But I also think there's an opportunity to bring a lot of people back into the Democratic Party. Again, this is where I view things differently from Senator Sanders. I believe that we can be true to our progressive values and be inviting to a lot of people who feel politically without a home right now. And part of what I would point to is that this president got elected pretending to care about the forgotten people. You remember that whole thing about the forgotten men and women trying to make himself a champion of the working class? And the only economic promise he's kept was cutting taxes on corporations, benefiting the extremely wealthy. He's saying that the economy is perfect because the Dow Jones is looking good, although we're seeing that that's maybe not going to last with this global outbreak. But here's the thing, for most Americans, including a lot of working class Americans who voted for this president, it doesn't do any good to have the stock market going up if you're not seeing it in your paycheck, or your paycheck going up is not nearly as fast as the cost of health and prescription drugs and saving for retirement and college and housing. This is not an economy that's working for most of us. And when I'm president, we're going to take the measure of a good economy, and it's not going to be the stock market. It's not even going to be the GDP. It's going to be the income growth of the 90%. These are the issues that I think are going to affect the everyday lives of people who may have been taken in by this president once, but don't have to do that again. And the other thing I would say to anybody who voted that way is, this president does not respect you. This president thinks you're a sucker. He thinks that you will support him while he and his friends are laughing all the way to the bank. Let's do something different, and let's do it together.
Wow.
We already clapped. We can't clap again.
We're going to be right back with more from
All right.
Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Don't go anywhere.
Okay. Thoughts? I wrote some notes. I didn't like, I don't know why, I've heard him say this before, but why say, I guess I know why, but I don't ever want to be the smartest person in the room. I think I get what he's saying is that he wants there to be a group of people around him that he can take influence from, and they will be experts in the area. But I don't understand the idea of you don't want to be the smartest person. Do you not want to read on the topic? Like, let's say he goes into a meeting about, let's just go with suicide as an issue. He doesn't want to have read up and to try and be like an expert in that field, like do his due diligence on that topic. I don't understand that quote that he has. I think I understand his reasoning. I just think the quote is bad. I don't ever want to be the smartest person in the room. You should always want to be the smartest person in the room. Why would you want to be dumb? I'm sorry, that doesn't make any sense. Just the fact that I know he isn't running in good faith totally detaches me from believing anything he says. Yeah, that's true. What's up, Be Real? How you doing? Another thing that I didn't really like that he says, by the way, when he first came on stage and they said, the crowd loves you. It's so weird. Gun control needed for suicide prevention. I did not like that. I don't dislike his gun control position because it's essentially Bernie's position when you look at it. It's the same. But we need to have gun control to prevent suicides because most suicides are caused by handguns. That's it. That's what he's implying. I'm sorry, suicide is usually a result of many other issues. Okay. There could be some mental distress, obviously, emotional distress, economic distress. It's not because they own a gun. It doesn't help, But if people are in that scenario, they're gonna, if they feel like there's no other option, owning a gun or not is not going to be the ultimate decider. I think that was a bad thing to say, to be completely honest, is talking about how somehow suicide prevention is controlled by having better background checks on guns. I thought that was actually very insulting, to be honest, to people who are in depressive cycles that maybe have thought about that before, or have, people that have attempted and survived and gotten the help they need. It's dismissive of the problems that encapsulate what it goes around as suicide. That one really pissed me off. That one made me mad. I also didn't understand the line of, this president got elected. I didn't really get that. This president got elected. Watch Donald Trump have seen that and then post something on Twitter like, you heard Mayor Pete, God elected me, or something like that. Watch, he's gonna say that. Shh. Our town hall's filled with people who are given questions to ask, or is CNN planting people with questions to destroy his character as well? No, it didn't sound like plants. Cool, I haven't been to town hall forever. Some of them, I think, are some softball questions. If you guys watched the Bernie Sanders one earlier, there were some questions in there that were obviously trap questions. Especially that the Confederate symbolism stuff. That was a very hard question. I highly doubt we see a question like that for Pete. That's not me being conspiratory. I don't think he's going to get something that hard. That was a hard ass question. Pete, by the way, in general, the dude needs to stop talking. Make his answers more brief. You can hear him like he has some tick or something when he's talking, where he does that because his throat is dry. Shorten those answers up, buddy. Okay, make them sound bites. Let's get back to it.
All right, we're live from Charleston, South Carolina with former Mayor Pete Buttigieg. Mayor, I have to ask you about this. Senator Sanders has been criticized for remarks that he made about praising the literacy program.
Thank you, Russell. You're probably right. Not God.
In Cuba. He stood by those comments last hour. Here's what he said. He said, you know what? I think teaching people to read and write is a good thing. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
So this is part of what I'm getting at when I say that in our one shot to defeat Donald Trump, we should think carefully about the consequences of nominating Senator Sanders. I don't want, as a Democrat, I don't want to be explaining why our nominee is encouraging people to look on the bright side of the Castro regime when we're going into the election of our lives. We need to stand unequivocally against dictatorships everywhere in the world.
That's just dumb. Bernie's answer was awesome to that.
So you don't think that's a good excuse? He says he thinks he's a dictator, but literacy is a good thing. There's no nuance to that.
Why are we of course, literacy is a good thing, but why are we spotlighting the literacy programs of a brutal dictator instead of being unambiguous in our condemnation about the way he has treated his own people?
So, Mayor, you have been making the case that you are the strongest alternative to Senator Sanders. The former Vice President, Joe Biden, has been doing the same thing. Senator Amy Klobuchar has been doing the same thing. Former Mayor Bloomberg has been doing the same thing as well. The voters have yet to coalesce around you and the top challenger as a top challenger to Sanders. Have you spoken with any of your rivals about uniting around a single non-Sanders alternative?
No. But I'll tell you why I'm the best.
I was going to say, do you want to elaborate on that?
I'm the best alternative to Senator Sanders because I'm the only one who's beat him this year, anywhere. We have put together a campaign that has a different way of approaching politics, that has drawn together people across ideological spectra and in different kinds of communities, and stand the best chance not only of defeating Senator Sanders, but if we can unify as a party, but of defeating President Trump in the fall.
Yeah. But if you're concerned about that, honestly, if you're concerned about that, we're coming up on Super Tuesday, you're coming up on South Carolina. If he's going to be hard to defeat if he continues to gather the number of delegates, and there are still people who are in there, and you are somehow, you're all fighting for that moderate lane, he's going to continue to gather those delegates.
Yeah, look, of course, I think it would be beneficial if everybody else were to drop out and support, say, my campaign. But I'm not stupid. I mean, that's not going to happen. We are competing, and our job is to make sure that we run strongest of all.
All right. Thank you for that. I want to bring in now Juan Best. He's a student at Claflin University in Orangeburg.
Bernie
He's
was standing
currently
up the whole time.
undecided, but leaning towards supporting you. Juan?
Good evening, Mayor Pete. Time and time again, we have seen politicians bail out large corporations. Do you support other candidates' plans to help out the middle class and wipe out the debt of the millions of middle-class Americans drowning in student loan debt? And what is your plan to make college more affordable?
Great question. And thanks for that, because this is personal for us. I don't know if you saw, they did a Forbes magazine ranking of all the candidates ranked by personal wealth. I'm the least. Married to a teacher, and we have a lot of student debt. So this is personal. Here's what I think we can do about it. First of all, on the front end, we should make college more affordable. Now, my plan would make it free at public colleges for the first 80% of Americans and expand Pell Grants. I just think that, and then there would be kind of a sliding scale. I do think if you're in that top income bracket, you should be paying your own tuition. And that's one area where I'm different from Senator Sanders, because we can use those dollars for other things. I also believe that on the back end, for those who have debt, we should expand the program for loan forgiveness for those who go into public service. It's on the books now. Maybe some of you have tried to take advantage of that public service loan forgiveness program. It's a great idea. Almost impossible to actually take advantage of. You got to go 10 years before you get any benefit at all. A lot of loan types don't even count. We could change that. We could make it more user-friendly. We could make it easier to qualify. And I would expand what counts as public service. Because if you're, for example, providing mental health services in an underserved area, I think of that as public service, whether you're technically working in the public sector or not. Those are some of the steps that we can take to get student debt under control and to make sure that this is a country that can actually deliver opportunity and where cost is never a barrier to somebody who seeks to go to college.
Ian Braddock is a Marine Corps veteran and a current student at the College of Charleston. He is an intern for South Carolina
I did see that, be real. That's pretty
Joe
cool.
Cunningham, and he is a supporter of yours. There he is right there, Ian.
Hi. Mr. Mayor, good evening. Mr. Mayor, I'm a Marine Corps veteran who left the service in 2018. When I was on active duty and since I was honorably discharged, I've had fellow Marines commit suicide and know of other countless service members who have taken their own lives, sometimes in VA parking lots. What specifically will you do, if elected president, to help prevent this pandemic from continuing and continuing to save the lives of fellow service members like you and me?
First of all, thank you for serving.
Thank you.
And you're right, it is unacceptable that fellow service members, people you and I served with, made it home from a deadly conflict, but didn't survive here at home. And to lose somebody after they have returned home is such a failure on the part of America to keep its promise to our veterans. And this is, the services we provide veterans, this is not doing anybody a favor. This is keeping a promise. Because when you put your right hand up and make your oath, that is a blank check you're writing to the United States of America. In return, the United States of America agrees that it will support you not just while you're on active duty, but for the rest of your life. Now, we've got a lot of work to do to deal with a shortage of professionals in the VA when it comes to mental health and to speed up the ability to hire people. We've got to true up the clinical pay because it's not always competitive with what you can get outside of the VA. And we need to make the hiring process a lot simpler. We got to do a much better job of linking the medical records that you and I had on the active duty side to the VA side. They're two systems that are barely talking to each other. And that's why I believe that the position for coordinating that information flow ought to sit in the White House, because then you know they're going to get their calls returned. And we also have to build up a culture broadly for veterans, yes, but for the country as a whole, where it's okay to talk about mental health struggles before they become deadly. It has got to become as normal and as acceptable to talk about a struggle with depression or bipolar disorder or addiction as it is to talk about fighting cancer or having a knee surgery coming up. That's a cultural shift that the president can lead. And the president's got to lead that in particular when it comes to the culture of our military, because as you know, there is rightly a culture around physical fitness, right? So much attention is paid on the shape you're in from the neck down. Now we got to make sure that we're looking after our service members up here as well.
Mayor, you serve. What have you witnessed personally about this?
Well, suicide has unfortunately impacted units that I've served in. And again, it's for the rest of somebody's life. They could be at risk, often for service-connected issues. And by the way, there are also some, especially from a prior generation before we really understood what we do now, about things like post-traumatic stress. It's always been there, but it didn't always have that name, who got discharged with bad paper, in other words, dishonorable discharges, because of issues that are actually directly related to their service. That's why we got to go back and take care of those bad paper discharges too.
But on the personal level, about the stress of service.
Yeah. I mean, look, I had the easiest possible situation to come back to in the sense that I had a job waiting for me, and I had a community that was incredibly supportive. And even for me, it was tough. Part of it is, of course, coming to terms with the danger you were exposed to. And just to be clear, it's not like I was a Navy SEAL, but there were a lot of moments when I felt my life was in danger when the rocket alarm went off on our base. And it's also just the shift from this environment where it's so intense and you have this sense of community and identity and purpose, and then it just changes so abruptly. And it's hard for anybody. And it took months for me to realize that I was personally very much affected by that disruption and to come to terms with it. And so many go through that, and we have to support them as they do.
John Kraska is the president of an investment banking firm. He supports you. John?
Thank you for taking my question. You spoke earlier about how your mayoral experience would prepare you for the presidency. My question is, how does your experience at McKinsey prepare you for your role as president?
Well, so part of my goal in working for, this is a consulting company that I worked for 2 or 3 years after I came back from school. And I wanted to learn everything I could about how the business world worked. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot of things that stay with me to this day in terms of how to manage budgets and understanding how finance works and how teams in the private sector operate. But I also learned some things that confirmed my sense that life in the private sector was not for me. That often client service firms don't really weigh the morality of the things that they're involved with. And McKinsey, my former employer, has been criticized rightly for many cases where they wound up doing a body of work that maybe would have made sense from a business perspective, but if you just stopped and thought about the consequences, not so much. And I think now is a time when we have got to make sure that the guardrails that are put on the business community, the regulations that we as a democratic society decide to impose on the business activities that can have such social impacts or environmental impacts are set so that we don't just expect companies out of the goodness of their hearts, perhaps at a competitive disadvantage, to do the right thing, but we establish a floor of the standard of social and environmental benefit that we expect the private sector to create, in addition to doing what they do, generating the jobs and the value that they're supposed to.
Megan O'Gara is an administrative assistant at the College of Charleston, and she's leaning towards supporting Senator Warren. Megan.
Good evening. As an LGBT American, it's quite remarkable to be speaking to you on stage right now, so thank you. Our governor was recently granted a waiver for faith-based foster and adoption programs that accept federal funding, allowing these programs to reject prospective parents if their sexual orientation or gender identity doesn't align with the group's religious values. This ultimately harms the children in their care and discriminates against the LGBT community.
That's right.
If elected, how do you intend to protect and uphold the separation of church and state and work for these children?
It's kind of a badass question.
It's very simple. I believe that federal funding should never be used to discriminate. It is a basic principle. And here's how I think about religious freedom more broadly. And I think I feel this way both as a citizen and as a person of faith. Of course, it is so important to the fabric of this country that people of every religion and of no religion can practice their faith to the best of their conscience. But like any other freedom, that freedom ends where you begin to invoke it to harm other people. Just as the freedom of speech, right, or any other freedom is constrained by that. We all treasure our freedom of speech, but nobody here has the freedom to yell fire in this crowded space. It is the same way with religious liberty. We respect, and I will fiercely defend, religious liberty, but not past the point where it is being invoked as an excuse to harm other people through this kind of discrimination.
Mayor, just to be clear, do you believe that other religious and nonprofit institutions like colleges and homeless charities should lose their federal funding if they refuse to hire or serve LGBTQ people?
Yes, if they are discriminating, then they should not be doing it with federal dollars.
Okay. Barbara Robertson, who is an author and is currently undecided. She has a question for you. Barbara.
I saw a very moving moment when you had your event in Colorado, when a very brave 9-year-old boy told you and the world that he was gay. And I was wondering if there had been other moments like this that hadn't been caught on camera. And so far, what is the most hopeful message you have found during your campaign experience?
A great question.
What kind of question
yeah,
is
so this,
that?
if you didn't happen to see it, a couple of days ago, we did an event in Colorado. We had thousands of people there, and I always try to take questions, even at big events. This guy, I couldn't believe it, his 9-year-old asked for advice on how to be brave in telling others that he's gay. If you're a 9-year-old asking that question publicly around thousands of people, you don't need any lessons from me on bravery. And that's more or less what I told him, although I gave him the best advice that I could for the future, which is mainly just to let him know that even if it's not always easy, that I was going to be rooting for him, and a lot of other people were too. And there have been so many moments like that, whether it's a young person who is wondering where they fit, and this campaign sends a signal to them that they belong, or people I meet sometimes who are my parents' age, who come up to me, sometimes with tears in their eyes, just to let me know they never thought this day would come, that this would even be possible. And that whole thing makes me hopeful. Look, I'm under no illusions about the struggle toward equality in this country for anyone, and including LGBTQ Americans, where marriage equality was a huge leap forward, but it's not like that was the end. It's why we need an Equality Act. It's why we need to act to end the war on transgender Americans that's going on right now. But what gives me hope is that it really is possible to see those prejudices overcome and to do it in a way that brings more and more people along. Again, I recognize that the marriage equality in particular is a change that came so fast that a lot of people were disoriented by it, especially if they grew up learning a certain way of looking at the world. But if we can bring more and more Americans along on an issue like that, it gives me great hope for all of the other areas of American life where we have got to come together. We've got to look to the future, and we've got to make sure that compassion wins out over prejudice every time.
What was that like? Did you see yourself in that 9-year-old boy? Was it, holding back tears? Because I'm always surprised when people come up to me as a gay man and say, you know, you inspire me, and I'm always taken aback by it. What was that like for you?
Yeah, it was really emotional and also extraordinary because, you know, I meet people who have such a sense of who they are so much earlier in life than I did. I was wrestling with this, I mean, well into my 20s. If there was a pill, if there was a pill that I could take and not be gay anymore, I would have jumped on it. And thank God I didn't, because then I would not have the amazing marriage that I have now.
That was not a good idea.
When I think about the effect that this campaign may be having on people, look, I'm not running to be the gay president of the United States or the president of the gay United States. I'm out here to serve everybody. But I do think about the fact that this very thing that I thought might mean that I would never get to make a difference, never get to serve in uniform or in office. Talk about God having a sense of humor, that this is one of the things that's actually helping me make a difference before we even know the outcome of the campaign.
Former Mayor Pete Buttigieg will be answering more questions from our audience right here after this break.
That was I think he's going to hate that he just said that. Okay, so a couple things from this one. Pete, so one of the things was the question about if Sanders was right to say all that stuff about Castro. If you actually look at what he said about Castro, which you guys might have saw if you were watching the Sanders section earlier, was that he said that when Castro first came into power, he had a program called this literacy program where he taught every citizen of his country how to read and write. And Bernie Sanders basically said, that is a good thing. I think having people read and write is a good thing. And then he went on to say that Castro was this monster that demonized his people and would kill people, and kill his opponents and all this stuff. So that was not good. But as he said earlier, like you can see a good thing from that. You don't just demonize, like people reading and writing is a good thing. Why are you automatically supposed to say, nope, that was an authoritarian regime. They are awful garbage and down with that country and all those people. Like, I don't. The fact that he's disagreeing with Bernie on that is silly. The other thing that was a little rough of him saying was that he's like, oh, it was tough for me coming home. It was really hard for me coming home from the military, but, I had a job and a community and all this stuff. I think veterans might look at that and say, it's pretty fucking hard coming home. And excuse my language. But, it's so tougher than coming home to a job and a supportive community and a family and all that stuff. I thought the host has been asking a little bit of easy follow-up questions. He almost seems like he's a little starstruck a little bit by Pete, which is a little weird. He's not, because like you saw what happened with Chris and Bernie. Like, Jesus Christ, Chris is like, okay, but seriously, how are you going to pay for it? Like, really hammering me on the questions, which I like because Bernie's able to defend that stuff on his feet without a problem. The last one is pretty obviously his, if there was a pill to not be gay, I would have jumped on it in a second. So I think what he's trying to get across is that it is a tough life for gay people that may be closeted, that are in areas of discrimination, with their community and family and friends and all that kind of stuff. I think that's what he's trying to say. However, saying it like he did is a little bit, I think, harmful to that community. That I think he's going to want that one back, or someone's going to ask about it. He should be taking a stance of being very proud of his sexuality, as he should be, and promoting that other people should feel pride as well and comfortable being who they are. I think that answer in general was a very bad answer. That was a very bad answer. What wore on Transgender Americans? Caitlyn Jenner won Woman of the Year. That's true. I wonder if Don will stick his finger in Pete's face like he did in that bar to that poor patron. I don't remember that. We know the outcome. The wishing he wasn't gay thing was weird. It's very weird. That was a rough question. That was a rough answer. Sorry. Pete was a military equivalent of an Uber driver. Never came close to combat. Military intel? Okay, I didn't know that. I mean, he's still obviously serving his country and being a part of the military, and that's fantastic. But, I didn't really get the coming home. It was really rough coming back to my job as mayor or whatever, or his job at the investment banking firm. It's people that come home from the military and are living on the streets and have severe mental problems. Like, that is tough. Oh, sorry. Let's go back.
I want to talk about the coronavirus. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. The spread of the coronavirus
Guys, I'm gonna leave you for like 30
of China
seconds.
has rattled the stock market. You talked about it earlier in the town hall, with the Dow plunging more than 1,000 points today, as other indexes also fell sharply. If you were president, how would you respond?
Well, first of all, we've got to meet 21st century security threats with a forward-looking security policy. This president's idea of how to keep us safe is a big wall. That is a 17th century security solution. And everything from global pandemics to cybersecurity threats remind us that it's a little more complicated than that to keep the United States safe. There actually was an office in the National Security Council, part of the White House, that was designed to help deal with these kinds of global health security threats, and President Trump dismantled it. We need to do the reverse. I would be making sure that we have the coordination across the federal government for something that is a health issue, an economic issue, a security issue, and needs to have an integrated approach. But It's not enough to integrate within the United States. We've got to integrate internationally. The virus does not care what country it is in. And in order to deal with an issue like that, you need international partnerships and global relationships of the very kind that this president is tearing to shreds on an almost daily basis. This is why we need, first and foremost, for our safety as well as our prestige, to restore the credibility of the United States among the nations of the world.
Robert Maynor is the Assistant Director of Student Engagement at the College of Charleston Honors College. He is currently undecided. Robbie?
In Charleston, we're experiencing the effects of climate change perhaps as acutely as any city in the country in terms of flooding and frequent major tropical storms. Some studies suggest Charleston may be gone underwater in my lifetime. As president, what types of initiatives to combat climate change, both national and global, would you prioritize?
Such an important question. And we cannot let that happen. It's going to come down to these next few years. You know, the scientists tell us we've got until about 2030 to make a series of major changes to avoid catastrophe. But if 2030 is the scientific deadline, that means 2020 is the real deadline, because if we don't have a president who believes in climate science taking office next year, we're never going to make it. And communities from the low country of South Carolina to my own river city in Indiana are already feeling the effects of this. And the effects of this have been disproportionately harming communities of color and low-income communities, which is why we need to have environmental justice at the heart of our approach. Now, I believe it's not too late to mobilize the American people in a national project to make sure every part of our economy and society is geared toward facing the climate challenge. Matter of fact, if we get it right, we will create more than 3 million new jobs. And if we lead the world in doing something about it, which we have to because a lot of the emissions are coming from around the world, like the coronavirus, it's another example of a global security threat that requires global coordination. Well, maybe seeing the United States actually lead on these issues is part of how we can restore that dangerously harmed credibility of our country. So we will rejoin the Paris Climate Accords on day one, and that will be just the beginning of our global climate diplomacy.
I want to bring in Zachary Eagle, a co-founder of a local behavior analysis practice that helps treat adults and children with autism and other challenges. He is a supporter of Senator Sanders. Zachary.
Mayor Buttigieg, your recent fellow candidate Andrew Yang proposed a basic income of $1,000 a month to every adult citizen with no other eligibility requirement as a response to past and future job loss to technology and overseas outsourcing, and an acknowledgement that job replacement cannot keep pace. Do you support basic income as a solution to ever-increasing numbers of Americans having their jobs displaced? If not, how do you propose to overcome future job loss, as well as restore communities that have already been suffering for decades?
So I think that basic income is interesting and deserves to be taken seriously. There are some pilot programs going on right now in places like Stockton, California, and I'd like to see what we learn from them. But I'm also worried that it's a little bit too easy of a fix to a different kind of problem. Don't get me wrong. Technology, automation are definitely changing what it means to be a worker. But I think the biggest inequities that we're dealing with right now in our economy are happening for a different reason. For example, earlier today, I had the opportunity to stand with fast food workers who are mobilizing to demand a $15 minimum wage and a chance to join a union. I was with Tawana, who was a worker I'd met last summer and was reunited with today, who is trying to take care of a sick child on an income of less than $9 an hour. The problem there is not automation or globalization or outsourcing. She has a job, she's good at it, and she works hard. The problem is she's not getting paid enough. This is a matter of a policy decision, and we need a different policy decision to raise wages for those who are working and give them the opportunity to bargain for better working conditions. And that's true as we look to a future where we're actually going to need a lot of workers, but maybe in different areas. We're going to need more direct care workers than we have right now, by the millions, in order to deal with supporting an aging population. We're going to need more than ever people to take jobs as teachers, and jobs that can't be done by a machine because they involve dealing with surprises or dealing with exceptions or dealing with other human beings. And Basic income's not going to fix that. It's not going to fix the economic decisions, the anti-labor decisions that have been made helping to drive poverty over the last 30, 40 years and drive income inequality. And the other thing we got to recognize is that even when we're looking at those jobs that are lost as a consequence of technology, it's not just what we've got to do about making sure people have income. We've got to also make sure that we recognize that a job is your identity. If you lose that, you lose a part of who we are. And that's why it's so important that we create richer sources of identity in American life, making sure that we connect people up to opportunities for service, like the voluntary national service program that I'm proposing, to be connected in their communities and find meaning from other sources. Otherwise, that void will be filled by some very ugly things, from substance use to things like white nationalism. Where people are preying on those who feel like they've been displaced. So, yes, I'm interested in universal basic income, but there's a lot more to fixing these problems than that.
Derek Rucker is the Grants and Evaluation Director for a Children's Advocacy, Domestic Violence, and Rape Crisis Center in Beaufort. He is deciding between you and Senator Warren. Derek?
Hello, Mayor Pete. Can you tell me and us 3 things about you that the American people don't already know?
Wow.
What the hell?
That's a hard one, just because I feel like when you run for president, somebody once called it an MRI of the soul. By the end of it, or frankly by the middle of it, you feel like people have gotten to know just about everything about you. I'll mention one. People keep asking me why I'm not more outwardly emotional. And one of the things I think people don't know about me is how passionate I am. It's probably why I've learned to deal with things in a way that tries to be as calm as possible. Because I feel so passionate about things I see going on around the world and things I see happening right around me. What else don't people know about me? They probably don't know as much about the things I'm bad at, because you don't advertise those. Although I think people are beginning to learn that I can't dance. I just can't. Exactly. Somebody saw me doing I won't even do it, the raise the roof thing. Gosh, I'm looking at Chess now to think of anything else that people don't already know about me.
You play the piano?
Yeah, but people know that, right? I don't know.
Your favorite food?
Beef jerky.
Are you a foodie?
Yeah. Yeah. I got a
Did you say
reaction
beef
on that
jerky?
one. Wow. Yeah.
Is that all right?
Yeah. Thanks for the question.
Do you eat in the middle of the night? Are you
kind of maniac?
No, I'm pretty well behaved.
Jerky.
All right. Beer, I don't know. Tequila. Let's bring in Pam Ireland, a retired corporate attorney. She is currently undecided but is leaning towards voting for you. Pam?
Okay.
Welcome to Charleston.
Thank you.
One thing I think is important in a leader is the ability to listen and to admit when you may not be right. Can you give a couple of examples of recent situations in which you've listened to advice of others and maybe adjusted your approach as a result of that?
Sure. Give you one. In terms of campaign strategy, we invite reporters to come to fundraising events and hesitated to do it for a long time, I guess just out of habit. That it was just something that was not done. I wish we'd done that sooner, because what happened was reporters started coming. They realized that I say the exact same thing at a fundraiser in somebody's backyard as I say in a town hall, and got bored, and sometimes they don't even come anymore. I should have done that a long time earlier, but people encouraging me to do it made me realize that that was a good idea. At a more profound level, listening to the experiences of those whose lives are different from mine, especially in my own hometown of South Bend, was a very important part of how I learned to do a better job as mayor. I arrived with a head full of ideas about the things that we could do. And many of those ideas played out. I mean, again, I'm so proud of what our city did to pull itself out from the shadows of the past, of losing the factories and losing so many people. But when, for example, I was so focused on making sure that we dealt with vacant and abandoned houses, that we wound up moving very quickly, and some people got caught up in an enforcement-heavy approach that we needed to change. People stopped me, people from the community. Gladys Muhammad is here from South Bend, who's a strong supporter, but also always lets me know when I'm getting something wrong. And it's hard when you are so focused on your approach that you think is the right one to take on that input. But hearing about the effects from the ground level of policies that we believed in, but that needed to be adjusted or shifted. When it came to understanding the story behind the story on the mistrust and fear between the police department and black residents in our city. When I was so focused on the narrow legalities of making sure we ran the department the right way, I would not have been able to make the changes that we've made without listening,
Mayor,
without growing.
When I walk up,
that's
I'm like
part
the
of the
music
job.
at the Oscars. I'm playing you off right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor. Up next, we're going to hear from businessman Tom Steyer.
All right. I hope no one is super displeased. I am not very interested in hearing Tom Steyer. I just don't think he's very interesting. He's also a little scary. He creeps me out a little bit. Pretty good. I mean, it's okay. I'll say this. I don't want to bash on other candidates. You obviously know who I support. Bernie Sanders supporter. But I like hearing everyone else's point of view. I think Pete made some good points here. I think Pete made some really bad comments. I think that the pill for not being gay anymore is going to really not go well for him. What did we hear at the end there? Oh, the whole if we get it right thing is strange to me. So when he was talking about climate change, he was saying, if we get this right, if we get it right, we'll be able to save people and houses and whatever. Why is this? Hang on a second. I gotta pull a audio cable. Okay, it'll be fixed in just a moment. I don't like as a president, shouldn't you be, or a candidate for president, shouldn't you be more sure that your systems could work or whatever? I know that you can't always be like, oh yeah, we're for sure going to do this because that requires votes and other people's input and all that kind of stuff. I get that. Okay, but like when you're at a town hall and people are saying, are you going to do this? Well, if we get it right. Okay, so there's a chance that you're not going to get it right. Like, that seems a little bit weird. That was one thing. Richer source of identity was a little bit strange. We need to have a richer source of identity. Okay, I didn't really get it. I do understand. And by the way, before Pete came on, I said that I had heard that in his town halls, he's much more personable. And relatable. That's what I had heard. After watching this, I don't get it, really. I like that he's young. I like that young people are running for office. That's fantastic. I don't think he's bringing anything like novel or, new ideas that aren't already being put forth by, quote unquote, better candidates. I don't think that debate helped him at all with black voters or Latino voters, where he's really getting crushed. I think in Nevada it was 2% of the vote, black voters. That might have been Latino. I don't remember. It's low. It's real low. I don't think that's going to help him win over supporters from Joe Biden, who is doing very well. Can you picture Pete swinging right after the Democratic nomination? Absolutely. Are you serious? That guy's pretty much a Republican. I say that full well knowing that I support a very leftist candidate. So it's possible that's a bias when I say he's a Republican, meaning he's much more right. I realize that. But that's how he seems to me. That's how he will also seem to all Bernie supporters. I'm really, really disappointed in that pill question. I'm having a tough time getting by it. I'm just being completely honest. I don't see how he makes out well with that. That was a mistake. I think I don't know how he gets out of that one. It's unfortunate. I don't dislike Pete. Pete might not be a bad running mate for Bernie, because Bernie is going to want to select someone who is young, as he said earlier. In the perfect scenario, to collect demographics, to be a more moderate candidate, possibly female. Pete wouldn't be the worst candidate for him to pick if you're talking about unifying the party. Wouldn't be the worst. Also, Pete has admitted many times that he is a big fan of Bernie Sanders, and he grew up sort of looking at his work and idolizing him. And I don't know, hearing him attack about that Castro thing is really, it's sticking in my craw, or whatever the term is. Tomorrow, there's going to be a debate. Likely, there will be a Bernie should pick Tulsi Gabbard. I don't dislike Tulsi Gabbard. I think that would be a reasonable pick. I think that she may be unrecovered from getting smeared by Hillary Clinton, which is tough. I think Hillary had a grudge against her when she supported Bernie in the last election. If you don't know the story, Tulsi Gabbard used to work at the DNC. She's the one that brought up that Bernie was kind of getting screwed by the DNC and spoke to the leadership saying, hey, this isn't right. This is not fair. And they basically told her to shut up. And so she quit the DNC. And then if you remember the Democratic convention, she's the one that announced Bernie. There's always someone that announces the candidate and comes on. Tulsi's the one that announced him. So she has a bone to pick with the DNC for show. Only candidate consisted on ending regime change war. She's got some solid stances. A lot of them are in the line with Bernie. They've been friends. I just don't know if she can get out from under that Russian asset garbage with that Hillary Clinton. Jesus Christ. Pete's comment on black women screaming in ER showed he didn't do the work. I guess you're right. I hadn't thought about that. I just think that he really needed to come on this town hall and kill it with black voters in South Carolina, and I didn't see anything relatable. It all seemed very just talking in circles. Wasn't enough. He says he's so passionate, but he doesn't seem that way to me. He seems a little robotic, and again, that's bias. Because the candidate that I support is nothing if not passionate about everything he speaks about. By the way, I'm looking on Bernie's website again to see if that message is uploaded, and I don't see it yet. If you missed it earlier today, Bernie was on, and he said that he was going to upload how they were going to pay for all of these changes. He had a sheet that he gave to the moderator because he figured the question was going to come up. And by the way, did it seem to you like a lot of Bernie's questions were either kind of attacking his positions, or none of them seemed scripted? I'm not saying there's some conspiracy where they gave Pete all the questions beforehand. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it just seemed like Pete went into these long diatribe of answers, and nothing was really. It just didn't seem and feel genuine to me. Did Bernie get the question about what's something that people don't know about you? I don't think that I heard that. I should have mentioned the $60 income disparity, quality of care plus racism. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that went super well for him. Now, here's a question. Debates tomorrow. What the hell is his strategy in that? If you guys didn't see the totals, Nevada was released at 100%. Let me bring him up. He would have if he really cared about those issues. I mean, it's tough to argue with that. What am I doing here? I want to open this. What the heck is going on? I'm trying to open this link. It's not letting me. There it goes. It's on a little screen, I know, but I'll zoom in a little bit. Nevada results with 100% reporting. Bernie Sanders, 24 delegates. Biden, 9. Buttigieg, 3. Everybody else didn't place. Buttigieg is getting very low numbers because he did not qualify statewide because you need to hit 15%. But you can see Biden made a comeback here to overcome Pete after getting his butt kicked in the first 2 states. And Sanders just, dominated. Sanders got an overwhelming majority of the Latino vote. I think someone was saying it was like 70+%, an overwhelming majority. Union workers as well. Remember that whole talk about how the culinary union was, and they were passing like sort of don't vote for Bernie thing or you're going to lose your health care, and they were trying to confuse people and all that kind of stuff. And Pete was marching on the line with them. A lot of those union workers broke with the union and voted for Bernie instead. Yeah, so Nevada did not go how Mayor Pete wanted. Black-white mortality was equal under the VA universal free type healthcare. There was a prostate cancer study done that showed this. Oh, really? Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So this was Nevada. I'm honestly very impressed by Bernie's success in the face of that confusion propaganda. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, they went and found him saying that literacy was good, that Castro's regime did something good at the very early stages. And they're doing all they can to spin that into, look at, he's supporting authoritarian regimes. Like, how would you... Here's the other thing about that kind of spin against Bernie. Like, the guy has been saying the same thing for 50 years. He's been fighting the same fight for like 50 years. And you might be able to say, well, that makes him stubborn. Sure. But do you think, like, knowing what you know about him and the type of person he is, you think that someone is going to support an authoritarian regime that kills its own people and suppresses them? Does that sound like Bernie Sanders at all, ever? It's absurd and disingenuous to say, like, he shouldn't be praising authoritarian regimes. If there's any candidate that's not doing that, it's probably Bernie Sanders. It's just absurd. It's so stupid. And of course, they hammered it on him like 3 times. And then they asked Pete about it. Oh, well, he shouldn't be saying anything good. So I'm sorry, do you think that children reading and writing is bad? Well, that's fine. But Bernie's still wrong to praise them, even though Bernie said the reading and writing part was good. Everything else was bad. Sometimes it's frustrating, right? I guess that's some of being a politician. You don't really talk straight, right? It doesn't benefit you to talk straight like that. This was part of the reason I like Bernie. I think he only talks straight. I don't think he knows any other way. I'm trying to find the look on the politics channel and see if they got any, or politics subreddit, see if they got any of that link for the Bernie financial breakdown. When people in the Panama Papers attack, yeah. Did you see they finally prosecuted one of those people? Forget who it was. A lot of talk that might be like their scapegoat, and that no one else is really going to get punished about it. Give me why isn't politics loading? Is politics like completely down on Reddit right now? What the hell is going on? Check Sanders subreddit. Yeah, I think the politics subreddit might be down. How does Bernie pay for his plans? Oh, it's up. Oh, daddy, let's take a look. The details. Let's go. It is posted, ladies and gentlemen. You can go to bern-igege-rren-den-berg. Find out issues. bern-igege.com/issues/how does Bernie pay his major plans. I will link it in the chat if you'd like to follow along. or look at it on your own. This could be pretty interesting. It will College for All cancel student debt. It will cost $2.2 trillion to make public colleges and universities and trade schools tuition free and to cancel all student debt over the next decade. It is fully paid for by a modest tax increase on Wall Street speculation that will raise an estimated $2.4 trillion over 10 years. Click here to read the plan. Jesus Christ, was this just updated? Oh my God. This might take like days to read through. Oh, is this the original plan? I can't tell. Make colleges free. Okay. Bernie in the White House, he will pass the College for All Act to provide at least $48 billion per year to eliminate tuition and fees at four-year public colleges and universities, tribal colleges, community colleges, trade schools, and apprenticeship programs. I like that he included that too, by the way. Trade ships are important. Cancel all existing student debt. Saying our $1,000, nearly 40% of college student thousands. Almost 2/3 of student debt, 73% of all the benefits. Cancel student debt, go to the bottom here. Okay. When Bernie is in the White House, he will cancel the entire $1.6 trillion outstanding student debt for 45 million borrowers who are weighed down by the crushing burden of student debt. This will save $3,000 a year for the average student loan borrower. I'm looking. I'm trying to parse through some of this information. I don't know what's new and what's old. Let's move on. Expanding Social Security. Bernie plans to expand Social Security, will increase benefits to low-income senior citizens and people with disabilities by more than $1,300 a year. It is fully paid for by making the wealthiest 1.8% of Americans those whose incomes with over $250,000 a year pay the same rate into Social Security as working families. This bill will also extend the solvency for Social Security to the year 2070, ensuring that Social Security can pay every benefit owed to every eligible American for the next 50 years. That's pretty good. Housing for all. Bernie's proposal to guarantee housing as a human right and to eliminate homelessness will cost $2.5 trillion over the next decade. It is fully paid for by a wealth tax on the top 1/10 of 1%. Those who have a net worth of at least $32 million. Okay. Universal child care. He announced this today, by the way. Guarantee universal child care in preschool to every family in America who needs it will cost $1.5 trillion. It is fully paid for by a wealth tax on the top 0.1% who have a net worth of at least $32 million. Wealth tax will raise a total of $4.35 trillion. Okay, so that's the number he just talked about. They're doing the housing for all and the pre-K on it. Eliminating medical debt. Fully paid for by establishing an income inequality tax on large corporations that pay CEOs at least 50 times more than the average worker. Damn. Okay. Green New Deal. $16.3 trillion climate change proposal that Bernie has introduced will fundamentally transform our energy system away. It's fully paid for by raising $3 trillion by making the fossil fuel industry pay for their pollution, generating $6.4 trillion in revenue from the wholesale energy produced by the regional power marketing administrations. Reduce defense spending by $1.5 trillion by scaling back military operations on protecting the global oil supply. That seems possible for sure. Collecting $2.3 million in new tax revenues from 20 million new jobs created by the plan. I like that. Saving $1.3 trillion by reducing the need for federal and state safety net spending due to the creation of millions of good-paying unionized jobs. Raising $2 trillion in revenue by making large corporations pay their fair share of taxes. Okay. Rich people are going to come after him. Well, they already are, but damn, he's coming on hard. Yeah. They don't like him, by the way. And if you don't know, like, the whole disinformation campaign and trying to smear him every way and donating big sums of money through super PACs to every other candidate, that's from those rich people. They don't want this to happen. You kidding me? They don't like the sound of this. Give me 1 second. Let's check something. Medicare for all. Okay, here we go. According to a February 15, 2020 study done by the epidemiologists at Yale University, Medicare for all will save $450 billion in healthcare costs, creating a 4% income-based paid premium by employees, exempting the first $29,000 in income. In 2018, the hardworking families. Okay. Under this option, a typical family of 4 earning $60,000 would pay a 4% income-based premium to fund Medicare for all on income above $29,000, just $1,200 a year, saving that family $4,775 per year. Revenue raised about $4 trillion over 10 years. Imposing a 7.5% income-based premium paid by employers, exempting the first $1 million in payroll to protect small businesses. Well, that seems reasonable. In 2018, employers paid an average of $14,000 in private health insurance premiums. Revenue raised $5.2 trillion, eliminating health tax expenditures, which would no longer be needed under Medicare for all. That's $3 trillion. Raising the top marginal income tax rate to 52% on income over $10 million. I saw that. I think the top rate is like 39%. It will now be 52%, which is pretty big. That will raise $700 billion over 10 years, replacing the cap on state and local. I mean, Jesus, dude, this is pretty detailed. I know a lot of people were hitting on Bernie saying like, yo, you have all these grand plans, but no idea how to pay for them. You just keep hand waving. Here's his plan. I'm sure there's stuff in here that people don't like, but you can't hit them on you don't have a plan anymore. It's right here in front of you. I'll need to go through this in a little bit greater detail at some point, probably tomorrow while I'm working. But it's here. Follow the link, check it out, see for yourself. If you want to talk about it, source of music is Chill and Groovy. Oh, thanks, man. It's on Spotify. There is a playlist called Chill/Lo-Fi Copyright Free Music. The important thing about that is that if I want to clip this portion of the show, I can put it on YouTube and I won't get hit with copyright strikes or anything because it's copyright free. Highly suggest it. There's a paid group of black activists that travel supporting whatever the donor wants. I think it's called Black Vote on Twitter or something like that. So fake. I'm sure that happens a lot, to be honest. I mean, money controls everything. This is why we need a candidate like Bernie Sanders. Get all that money the hell away from politics. It's so absurd. Why do we have billionaire candidates that can dump trillions of dollars into their own campaign? It's so much simpler if you just say, like, if you want to run for president, sure. But you have to, you're given a stipend from the government. Like, here's $250,000. That is what you run on. Something like that. Yeah, no problem. It's a sweet playlist. Okay, let's chat a little bit before we get out of here. As usual, thank you for joining the show. It was a good talk. I'm happy we got to see Pete. Not necessarily to sit there and just berate him all the time. He had some good points, but I had never seen a town hall with him in it, and I wanted to really take it in. Thank you for the comments in the chat. Tomorrow is the next debate. I usually stream Monday, Wednesday, and Friday right here on the show at 9 p.m. Eastern. We may do a special show tomorrow for the debate. The only thing that may throw a wrench in that idea is that I may have a work commitment because the CEO of my company is in town. So we'll see. I'll let you know on the Twitter, which, by the way, you can find just below this channel. Moshkatees and all the social medias and stuff. You're also free to join the Discord, which is linked below this. We have a lot of political talk in there throughout the week. Looking at polls, getting ready, stuff like that. Going back and forth with different candidates, all that kind of stuff. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you have a great night. Let me know if you have questions about what we saw today, ideas, feelings you had about Bernie up there. Definitely about this new plan. I got to dig more into this financial plan that he has to pay for all this stuff. Have a great rest of your night. Get some good sleep. Big week ahead of us. Big debate tomorrow. Yeah. Just in general, kick ass this week. Have a great night. Talk to you soon. Bye.